So
And the very first thing is going to be Anne's backdrop. So when you see the video, Anne, you'll see straight away. Sorry, Karen, carry on.
that's okay, don't worry. Okay, so if anyone else would like to perhaps talk about who doesn't want to read tonight, perhaps talk about anything that they've been working on or any particular things they've come up against that they would like to discuss, then that's always an option as well, because this first half of the workshop is really to hear work, but also perhaps to do a bit of problem solving if you sort of come a cropper against an idea or just something that you'd like to talk to everyone about. So there's always that option, but don't feel any pressure to even do that if you don't want to, because we've all had different weeks, I'm sure. Some of us feeling perhaps more productive than others. It always sort of seems to go that way. Some days you'll be in the flow, and other days it will feel a little bit more difficult. So anyway, right, so let's get on with hearing the work. And if you'd like to introduce it and say perhaps what it's based on, or if you can go straight into it, or if it's got a title, then that's also good. So we're going to start with Eleanor tonight. Hello, Eleanor.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Can indeed.
Right, so this is a piece about a journey I took over half my life ago when I was 24. And what have I called it? Bad journey with weather. It's really personal, so I'm really nervous about reading it. I remember I was so hungover, truly one of the worst hangovers in my life. But hey, it was my birthday and boy, had I had a good time. This was the night I finally kissed her, the woman I had unexpectedly fallen in love with what seemed like forever ago, who had seized my heart and has never let go. But then what did I do? I couldn't yet handle it, and I left her and went with the cute roommate guy into the land of bad drunk sex, only after to be led out in shame and placed unceremoniously on an old broken lounger. I remember not sleeping and watching the cold rain turn into ice overnight, and when morning finally came, the world was covered in a thick sheet of clear, hard water. It was one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. A bare tree with every twig encased in ice. I remember being staggered when I was told my bus would not be going from Philadelphia to New York because the world was covered in a thick sheet of clear, hard water. I had to beg money from my equally poor friends to get the cheap, slow train back because I was flying out from JFK that night. I remember not having ice skates. I really needed ice skates, and it was fun for the first few streets, slithering down the car-free road, trying not to slip, then laughing when we did, and seeing the cartoon man go literally head over heels. But the train station was 1 mile away, and I was so hungover, truly one of the worst hangovers in my life. And the tense ice walk was killing me, but we would hold on to each other with tears of joy, though we didn't talk about the kiss. And 1 minute longer was 1 minute more with her, and a 15-minute journey turned into 2 hours, and that was 105 more minutes I could have with this wonderful woman I had not been with for so long. I remember the train, and it was all going to be okay now because despite it being the slow train, the journey was only a couple of hours and I'd be in New York by 2 p.m. to catch my 9 p.m. flight. But the trains were all slow trains because the world was covered in a thick sheet of clear, hard water, and my heart felt the same because this time we'd not just talked about love. This time we were testing if the hot baked bread 2 years ago had cooled enough for us to taste it. And though almost instantly dropped, it had at least finally been put to our lips, and it was the best bread in the world. I remember the train stopping all the time, and outside it was getting darker and darker, and every Amtrak train was let in front because you paid more for the Amtrak train, and this was how it was. I screamed inside my head in pain and nausea because I was so hungover, truly one of the worst hangovers in my life, and the children crying were too loud and the seats were too hard, and I had no idea when I would see her again. I remember finally getting to my sister's house with minutes to spare, and I had to leave for the airport. And as I stuffed my belongings into my suitcase, the tears couldn't stop. And I screamed at my sister, I love her, I love her, I love her. And there's nothing I can do about it. She was living across the ocean. She was living with her boyfriend. She was broke, and so was I. There was nothing I could do about it. I remember sitting in the airport lounge and I was so hungover. Oh God, I was holding on to getting on the plane, hair of the dog drinking, eating the food I had paid for as I had no money to pay for food, and finally sleeping. I remember waiting in the airport for the plane to come for 3 whole hours until midnight, and we got on the plane, but we sat on the stand for 1 whole more hours because world hard water. Then just as I was about to go, fuck this, I'm sleeping in the aisle, we pulled out slowly, and I was so tired and hungry and hungover. And while it would all soon be okay, it was not okay then. I remember the captain came on saying, ladies and gentlemen, it looks like we may have to get out of here tonight, but first we need to de-ice the plane. And I remember de-icing my car windscreen, and it was not that long a job, but this was a plane, a whole plane covered in a thick sheet of clear hard water. And we sat by the runway being de-iced for 1 more hour, and my soul collapsed inside my aching, tired, hungover, lovesick body, and I nearly died. I remember the cabin crew doling out free drinks and food. Then I was curling up into a ball to sleep, and that food was the best food I have ever eaten, and that sleep was the best sleep I had ever had. And before I drifted off, I remembered that kiss, the best kiss I have ever known.
Oh my God. Wow.
Wow.
Well done.
Wonderful.
That was really great. That was great, Eleanor.
Oh,
Really
thank you.
great for
It's
us.
a journey that's been in my life for decades, and I've never written about it. So
Oh, it was a really, really good. I think the pace was really good. I mean, there's a lot to this piece, you know, that this endless hangover and this sort of looping back to this endless hangover that keeps sort of repeating itself because it won't go away. And these, you know, it was just, I think it's such a great spoken word piece as well because of the repetitions.
Yes,
but
I thought that.
the way in which those details really broke it up, like the paying more for the Amtrak train, which I really enjoy. I mean, I don't know if I'm alone here, but I love those sorts of details when they're thrown into a story because they're interesting, they're factual, but also they break up the feel of the emotional journey of it as well, to bring it to land it, to ground it. So that was great. And I just loved the de-icing of the plane and, you know, the thought process of like, well, I know how long it takes for a car, but this is an aircraft, you know. Yeah, I just thought there were so many great sort of segments to it, and then the way you pulled them all together was just really well done. And I can see that being performed, you know, a spoken word night. So
thank you.
yeah, really
It's been in
good.
my head for a long time, so it was good to. It was lovely to get it out. Like I never thought I would write about it, so it was really lovely. I'd written a piece before about my favorite holiday, and it was just like I kind of thought, and it just wasn't flowing. And then when he said about the awful one, it was like okay, I can tell you that.
And yeah, I mean, because the subject of the weather really kind of reflected the beauty, but also the sort of set stillness, and also the mistake was kind of it really all sort of with the well, not the mistake, but the going off, the when you had the kiss and then you went with the guy, and I think that was just a really interesting. It also that voice conveyed, I felt, a certain age that would, because of that, you really got to that kind of youthful age through the way it was described, I thought.
The urgency of it gave it
yeah.
that as well, didn't it?
The sort of, I mean, I'm not saying that at any age we can't feel that passion and that sort of soul, that, you know, as if life depends on this, because we can, but I do associate that kind of extremity of passion
there's
with
something about that, like we've always called it the hot baked bread of our love, which, and we're like, and now, you know, a few decades later, we're best friends, and she's married and with kids, and I'm and I'm not. And
well,
it's fine. We're just really good friends who adore each other now. But at the time,
please tell me she's not married to the guy that you went off with.
Oh, no, I mean, she's written a book about her time in Philly, which is amazing, and even, yes, incredibly. There were some times in that city.
that's great.
Anyway, I'm clogging everyone's time. So
no, I think that's great, Eleanor. Well done, and I look forward to seeing it on stage at some point. To spoken word night. But yeah, great, brilliant. And what was the title again?
Oh, it was just Bad Weather Journey.
Good. That's a good title. Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent. Right. Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to give some feedback before we have our next? Anne, would you like to? Yes.
First of all, I just want to say I loved every moment of that. I was busy scribbling down. There was too much for me to write. There's so much that I liked about it, to be honest. It was awesome. I mean, every word and each of the steps of that journey was an experience in itself. And as Karen says, obviously, that repetition, the perfect use of that repetition, and also the struggle that, you know, the decisions that we make, you know, about whether we go for it or whether we backtrack and make a different decision, like with the guy, you know, and those very kind of real experiences. For certainly, you know, I recognize myself in that, you know, about the, you know, I only wish, you kind of don't wish really, but we've all kind of been there in some shape or form, not everybody. But I just want to compliment you on a superb piece. I shall, probably all of them, by the way, but because you're the first, I'm so looking forward to re-listening to that on the recording. I learned so much in terms of technique from that particular piece. So congratulations, loved it.
Fantastic. Thank you. Does anyone else have any feedback before we move on to Anne? Or no? Okay. Right. If you do think of anything you'd like to add, please do put it in the chat area. Okay. Next up is Anne.
God, how do you follow that? With me.
Go on.
With me.
Go on,
anyway.
Anne. You can do it. You can do it.
Well, I haven't done anything. I haven't read for the last couple of weeks. So I thought I'd better get my act together. So here we go. This is called, so I'm kind of flipped over on my laptop, and it's called Tabletop. So here we go. It was a trip of a lifetime. The several zeros at the end of the trip ticket price were for my safety. After all, money equals safety and security, right? It was 2010. The World Cup was on in South Africa, and Chris and I were celebrating 7 up and down years together. Traveling is one thing. Sorry, I'm f***ing about with my computer here. There we go. Sorry. Traveling is one thing we did really well. So we did a lot of it. Canada, the Christmas that we spent on Tabletop Mountain was one of the best of my life, followed by Australia, Asia, and several European countries later. Here we were in South Africa at the beginning of a 4-week adventure, 5-star all the way. On this particular day, I woke up with a mother of a hangover. This was a rare occasion in itself because I'd been a non-drinker since 2001. Surely I could handle half a bottle of the finest champagne to celebrate our incredible experience. I regretted it deeply that morning. Not the glorious view across Cape Town harbour from my balcony could make it go away, or the seals on the harbour side looking as though they were actually taking the piss. We left this day to go up the iconic tabletop mountain, and my expectations of this day were as high as the mountain itself. I'd been waiting for this day for a very long time. I hauled my headache to the top of Tabletop. The scenery was breathtaking. To be honest, not as breathtaking as watching whales breach, blow, and hump in the bay outside our hotel room window the previous stage of our trip. Or sitting mesmerised for 5 whole hours watching a pride of lions perform a family fight, a power struggle like no others. So moved were we by our reconnection to the wild that we sobbed uncontrollably in the bar that evening as we left the protected reserve. It felt like leaving home. Back on top of Tabletop, I was waiting for the icing on my South African cake. This was where Chris was going to pop the question. I felt it, I knew it. He did indeed pop the question, but not on Tabletop Day. It was 2 years later when he asked me to marry him, by text, and about 2 months after we split up. My decision, why was it that I was always the one to leave? I loved Chris then, and I love him now. We are the closest of friends, and he's still the tabletop rock in my life, like he always was and always will be. But my husband, he should never have been. That is a very different destiny for me. To be continued. That's me.
Well done, Anne. That is, I tell you, what a fascinating story. And you had me on the edge of my seat listening. And I thought it was a very a really unusual, honest story, which I absolutely loved, because I think honesty and emotional truth, you can't really beat it in a story, and especially the way you presented the story, with the beginning and the double zeros and the idea of safety in money and the protection of 5-star treatment, and a 5-star kind of hangover is introduced. And then you give us the whammy that you haven't, that it's something you haven't been doing for 9 years. And so you're feeding us these dates, and we know, I thought it was really sensitively done, because you trusted us, the listener and the reader, to work out how serious that must have felt for you. You just gave us just enough information without without going into it, so that we could start to work out what was going on for you, for how you must have felt going up Tabletop Mountain with that hangover after all of that time as not drinking, And I think I haven't heard anything, a story form that is included that. I haven't. I've been reading a lot of memoir, but it hasn't been done in that particular way. So I think you've got a really great description, how you hauled the headache up the tabletop, and then you led us there, and we're like, okay, now we're going to get this scene. We're going to get this scene between Anne and Chris. Is it Chris?
Yeah.
But instead, no, you sort of took us away. You took us back to this other place, the lion's den, and all of this sort of emotional stuff. And then we're like, oh well, we're going to go back. We're going to find out what happens at Tabletop Mountain, and we don't. So you've left me on the edge of Tabletop Mountain in a way, but at the same time you haven't. So I thought it was really cleverly done. I loved it. I thought the pacing was perfect, and I just thought that it is to be continued, I hope.
And there's a sting. I love the sting in it as well. I love the fact that I didn't see that coming at all. The twist around the relationship, and that was great. It was really bittersweet and
thank you,
unexpected.
Yeah, and I think that's the beauty of it, because it doesn't go anywhere traditional, and so it swerves any sort of movement that you normally think a story is going to go. It swerves, and that is really exciting to listen to. I mean, I know it's memoir, I think it's memoir. It has the sort of real truth feeling of memoir.
Yeah.
But
I'm hugely grateful for that feedback. And what I would say is that I've learned so much from listening from all of your content, everybody that's on this, that's influenced my thinking. And I'd like to say that what I wrote was intentional. The only intention I went into was to tell a story. And partly the reason that I'm on this course is to introduce me and so I can be more creative. But this week I decided that I know the kind of writer that I want to be. And that's what I set out to do. The kind of writing that I did was not informed. It's not educational in a sense that I'm learning from this group. So if it works, it's something that I can repeat because it wasn't constructed. It was just a truth that came out. And I did do some editing, but I did it in an hour. So this gives me, I'm hugely grateful for the feedback, or all feedback regardless, but it gives me huge confidence in what I want to bring out from myself as a writer, because it's mine, you know. Thank you.
You should definitely continue it. I mean, whether it evolves into a bigger piece of work, whether it's a longer short story or a memoir or a novella or even a novel, whatever, I just think you should explore it just to see where it takes you, because I think there's so much there. I could feel that there was so much momentum, and you laid so much, as Karen said, you swerved so many of the obvious places where you could have gone, and there was such an element of surprise to it and freshness to it. And also there were so many seeds planted that you could explore further later on. You don't need to give us everything now. You can just give us a seed and we can find out more at a later stage. So if it were something you wanted to explore further, there's definitely the potential to do that in that piece.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you.
Yes, that's right. I think you've got, it's all those seeds are there, and then you can, it's a bit like if you introduce on the first page of your story a character, and then you've introduced them for a particular reason, and then if you wanted to write a longer piece, you then we find out who they are and why they're in the story. So that you would just need to go and sort of look at those seeds and think, well, how can I sort of develop those or tell us more about it?
Yeah, and I appreciate that, because, you know, the to be continued was partly because I ran out of time because I left it so late. But it's also, it was a metaphor for life, really. You know, why that it was right that, you know, he didn't pop the question. Thank God he didn't. It was never the right thing for me. It was never the right direction. And the husband before that wasn't either, which is why I can totally relate to Eleanor's, that piece about the choices that we make in life because we're not brave enough to go with what we feel. So there's all sorts of stuff in there. So I'm grateful, as I say, for your encouragement, because it really is, you know, packed with stuff that I'd love to write about.
One other thing I would say is be aware as well that, you know, there's this great thing at your disposal, which is that the timeline doesn't need to be in any fixed way. You could get to the point where you're at now, and then you could take us back in time and give us a scene from a year earlier, or even long, or maybe when you stopped drinking, just a scene from further back, and then bring us back into the present again. There's so many ways you can do that.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Because you've already made us curious about that. And as Karen said, you gave us the sense of what it felt like to have a hangover after so long, and how awful it felt. And I think it was right that it was handled the way it was handled in this particular section. But that doesn't mean that you can't at some later stage go back in time and describe the hangover that maybe there was a particular hangover that led to you stopping drinking those 10 years previously. That would be another interesting angle if you wanted to explore that. So
there's a story about that one, that's for sure.
Well, there are so many ways you can go.
I know, that's right.
There are so many ways I'm just, you know, I'm coming up to 6 months sober myself, so I can relate.
Yeah.
but there's just be a way of timeline. You know, things don't need to be, you know, in sequence. You can always write things out of sequence. You can always go back and tell us a story involving the narrator or another of the characters from any perspective at any point. You know, there's so many different ways to explore it, and sometimes.
And that's one of the things that I wanted to expose myself to and learn from you about how to. That's the crack in the nut, you know, that I said in week 1 about to think differently and not quite so linear. Because I write a lot for business, so it's very straight, it's quite serious, you know, strategy and all that kind of stuff. This is exactly the kind of feedback and encouragement, if you really, about how I can do that to take that forward.
Well, I had trouble a couple of years ago working on a novel that ended up being called The Black Path. Came out in 2016 or 17, and it took ages to write. And one of the things that I learned from my writing group that I was in at the time was that whenever I was just writing in a linear way, and I was getting stuck, instead of writing the next chapter, I was given the task of just writing a series of flashbacks around that particular character that I was writing about. And some of them didn't end up being in the book, but many of them did, and they actually added a whole richness to the story. So whenever things reached a certain point where I wasn't quite sure, or I didn't, because it's a thriller, I didn't want to give away too much too soon because it's a psychological thriller, I'd have a flashback to this character when she was a young girl, when she just got married, when her husband first went off and left for other countries. He was in the army and he was first posted on his first tour of duty, and how she got used to being in the house alone for the first time. So all these flashbacks, and some of them, they just informed the character, but some of them actually ended up in the book. And I just think that flashbacks are a very useful way of if you need to break up, if you're feeling that it's going too linear and it's becoming too predictable to you as the writer, just take some time off from doing that and just write a series of flashbacks, a bit like the I Remember exercise. But
I was just about to say that because Eleanor and her piece, great, you know, just takes you into a different space, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You know, I've learned a lot from just those 2 words, because it just literally in a more sensory space, I think, as well.
I tried to do it with, I thought, I shouldn't be stayed within this, and then it just didn't work, and it worked so well in I Remember. So.
Absolutely, you know, that's a real big takeaway for me today. It's very, you know, like your flashback suggestion, Paul. So that's a real, you know, that's a real nugget.
Yes, it's the sort of tapestry, trial and error, isn't it?
Yeah.
Of writing.
Yeah, and I might try that actually, to use the I Remember, the flashback I Remember, you know, to actually pull out some of the stuff that I've started, you know, in the continued wherever I take it. It would be interesting to see how it comes over it by using it as a way in.
I mean, there are. I know quite a few novelists who, you know, they need, before they can even write, they need to know everything about their character. They need to know all the backstory, even if it doesn't end up in the book. And I don't have that desire. I don't have that need myself. But what I do have is that there'll be some key characteristics or features of that particular character, and I will want to know incidents that illuminate those characteristics, whether they happen in the present day or whether they happened 20 years ago. And so the flashbacks that I tend to focus on tend to be ones that illuminate that element of the character, or a side of the character we haven't seen yet in the book. And so, as I said, some of them don't end up being used. Some of them are just done so that I know, but some of them end up being actually, you know, vital to the story. And I think as a reader, I really enjoy that. I really enjoy reading that, when suddenly it's like, oh, we're not in the present day now. We've gone back to another time. What are we going? What are we doing here? And who is this person that they're with? And how relevant are they? And it just keeps us curious. It keeps our curiosity going.
That's right. Hooks as well.
Yeah.
Act as important hooks. Great. Well, that's wonderful. Well done, Anne. Right. So, Alison. Hello.
Right. I wanted to read this because I'm not sure what it is. So it'll be quite good to see what others think that it might be. So I'll just read it to you. India 1994, Paradise Revisited. I went to India in 1994 with my friend Susie. We'd been having what turns out was a not so secret affair. She was straight and I wasn't out. I was in love with her and she wasn't with me. I was hoping that she would fall in love with me on this trip. Experience has taught me that this was a disastrous expectation. In reality, she wanted to get away, and going with me meant that she wasn't on her own. She had been through a big breakup. I was hiding my sexuality behind a haze of ecstasy. It was the 1990s, the E's were good. India was calling, Susie was difficult, I was a people pleaser. I kept a diary of our trip, which I reread looking for inspiration for this travel story. Upon reading, I had a massive realization. I was diarising what I wanted her to read in case she was interested enough to take a peek. It's like I put an Instagram filter on myself to make myself look like a perfectly desirable person. So I've decided to rewrite parts of the diary to reflect what was really going on. That's the real story. Funnily enough, I did fall in love on that trip with India. She worked her way into my heart forever. Diary entry, 30th of November, the train to Agra. The journey was turgid and boring. This was true. We got stared at constantly and were bombarded by a succession of unpleasant smells. This was also true. At one point, I put a sock covered in shower gel over my nose. My sock was covered in shower gel because the gel had previously exploded in my bag. This amused Susie greatly and we laughed for a while, which eased the tension and the boredom of the journey. This entry had been photoshopped. How it should read was, I was feeling very tense because Susie was in a mood with me and I wasn't sure why. Nothing I said or did were right. I somehow felt responsible for all of the bad smells, although they were nothing to do with me. I was feeling alone and worried that she might meet somebody that she would like to travel with more than me. I was totally relieved when me tying a sock covered in shower gel around my face made her laugh. Phew. Right, that's it.
I didn't want that to end.
No, I think that's another one that is to be continued.
But I just don't know what it is. Here's the diary anyway. Look, you can see it. Oh, look.
That's brilliant.
Stuck that picture on it.
Well, I think it is definitely a story. It's a story that is so playful, and it reminds me of a kind of Ali Smith kind of a story where it's all about truth and not truth, but it's mischievous.
Yeah.
And I think I would happily listen to a whole story about the truth of and then or the not true diary entries.
Yeah.
And with you then explaining what was really going on underneath.
Yeah.
I mean, it could be as simple as the way you set it out is the way you've exactly done it is you set up the story so we understand what's going on, and then you just have headings or little paragraphs with what you put in the diary, and then underneath you explain the true story of what happened, and then you continue it to its conclusion, which is either you can fictionalize whether she found out that or you just leave it. I mean, it's perfect in a way that we just understand the relationship through this kind of idea of what you wanted her to see you as, and then what was really going on. I think that's a beautiful premise for a story.
And once you've established it, it's so easy formally, because once we know what's happening, all you need to see is just the date, and then we know it's a diary entry. You don't need to explain that it is. You just have the date, and then you have the entry, which will be some paragraphs, and then a space, and then you then comment on what that last entry said and what the truth of it, what the truth was. It would really work really well. It's very dynamic structure, that is.
And it's what I love about it is it's so ripe for humor, and playing on what we know as a reader, and what letting us in to what's going on, and also what I want to know whether she knows at some point whether this is made up, and whether that's kind of the twist, I suppose, whether she does cotton on or not. I suppose that's
You know what you could have? You know what you could have? I mean, it's a little bit, this is the crime writer in me coming out, but what you could have is that you could finally reach an entry that's actually not in your handwriting, that is actually in someone else's handwriting.
Yeah.
And it's that she's read it and she's basically left a comment at the end, like in a guest, like in a guest book in a hotel or something.
Yes.
What a load of lying crap or something like that.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
I thought you were going to
Have
suggest
fun.
that I kill her, actually.
You have great fun with it.
Well, that's always an
You're
option.
gonna have such good fun with this.
Not really.
The structure of it, the structure's so solid, and it's such a well established one that readers will catch on to it very quickly. And then the playful way that you've already been using it, you can really push that, I think.
Okay.
And have a really good payoff, have a really good punchy payoff at the end, a twist.
That's
Well,
right.
Okay,
I would
cool.
go with it.
I think that's right about her actually finishing the story.
Okay.
It would be a one, you know, in different, you know, you can use just different fonts and you can use italics to represent the diary writing, or play around whichever, but just to set it out, it's really easy just to differentiate between who, like, voices.
Yeah, or you, once you've established the format where you've got the diary entry and then you now commenting on that diary entry, you could have the diary entry which is put in by the other person, and then your comment could just be, "These are not my words. I didn't write this. Who wrote that?" And then you realize you do it really simply like that as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's really playful what you've done, and I think you should play with it some more.
Okay. Thank you.
Or even just, who are you? You know.
Who am I?
No, I mean asking the person who's written, who are you?
Yeah. No, but it was weird rereading it, because like after last week I just thought, I'm going to read the India diary, and it's so long, you know, it's so long ago. And then, you know, sometimes it's really difficult to be honest with yourself like that. And that is definitely what I was doing. You know, I was definitely writing like as if, and I kind of think I probably left the diary lying around as well, but I don't think she ever did read it.
It's never too late.
But that's a great line. That's a good line that you could see that line. You can say that, you know, I left the diary lying around, and, you know, in the hope that she'd read it, blah blah blah. And then once we know that you haven't looked at this diary for however many years, it's perfectly feasible, and we will be really willing to make that leap of imagination that, you know, you didn't check it and suddenly you're reminded that there's this unexpected entry. I think that I think it would work beautifully. I think that would work really well.
Okay.
Fantastic.
It'd be a delicious payoff.
Yeah. It's such a great structure for a short story. Fantastic. Well done. It's about being honest, you see, tonight, isn't it? It's all this honesty that we're being, that's creating this great work. So wonderful. Michelle, you wanted to read a poem. Is this your poem, or is it
it's my poem that I wrote.
Lovely.
Okay, 1 second.
Okay.
It's an old one. I didn't, because I wasn't here last week. It seems like you're doing travel. Is that right, or am I?
That's right. That's right. We talked about bad holidays was the prompt, or holidays.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I got it. Okay, my bad eyesight. 1 second. It's quite long, but I don't know if I can get through it. It's not that long. Okay. Colombian Girl and Chinese Girl, Part 1. Colombian Girl. Dark ambrosia divine gave birth to dual motion, glittering eyes, sparkling teeth, a musical curve swaying, golden smile lighting, warm face, bright features, a tinkling voice melodic. Colombian Girl, from coffee fields up high in tropical sky, cocaine forests and cotton plateau, shrouded a lovely smile, melodic rhythm, hair cascading waterfall across mountains clear. You were fed on fruit and nectar, gave birth to delight, Smooth salsa playing, the sunset's red light, and birds in pairs flying summon a new life. Chinese girl, born in rice paddy fields, black hair crowned, shrouded with emerald mountains, fed on rice and water. Fruit jeweled the clear night, a plum blossom daughter. Creative new life, swam in the yellow river, skin cleansed with high grass. Almond eyes lit, ivory cheekbones framed, clear voice melodic, eyes sparkling in soft light. Bamboo enshrouded, birds flying across pure sky, a heron heralded. The mandarin ducks arrived, the plum blossom clouded, coral whips cried out. The heron flew off, rice paddy fields cried, the plum blossom daughter blessed by sunset sky. Colombian girl and Chinese girl again. Sorry, I won't read all of it because it goes on a bit. Ivory, coffee and emerald, rice paddy fields in mountains high. Oh, I missed that bit. Okay, descending the mountain. The steps were steep and winding. The Colombian girl fell while the Chinese girl laughed as she bandaged her hand. The Colombian girl's knees creaked like soft piano pedals and the yellow girl danced to the music. Coca-Cola stopped, lemon Sprite cigarettes, the mountain was shrinking, the 20th century rushing, pineapple tea chicha girls tumbling, falling, leaping, flying back into the world of humans and traffic, then split asunder, one east, one west, the western girl went east, the eastern girl went west, to find their own new mountains and to start their dreams again. I just stop it there.
That was great. That was great. I loved some of the imagery in that.
Slightly little longer, but anyway. Thank you.
No, I loved it. I loved it. It was I closed my eyes and I was traveling to those places. It was very rich and really evocative, full of wonderful imagery and turn of phrase, like, you know, piano, knees like piano pedals, or creaking like piano pedals. I just loved that. And this sort of girls go west and east, and it just this sort of these two women sort of coming together and then passing, and yeah, I thought it was very good. Is that something you've written in the last week, or you've written it a while ago?
No, I wrote it like 20 years ago.
Oh my God.
I basically met this. It was actually, can I quickly tell the story of how I met this Colombian girl? So I got on this empty bus, and this Colombian girl got on this empty bus, and then she wanted to sit next to me, and she said, "Can I sit next to you?" And I said, "No, you can't," because I thought, why does she want to sit next to me when the whole bus is empty? And then we got to the next stop, and suddenly all these Colombians, we were in Nepal, all these Nepalese people piled on the bus, and the whole bus was full. So I ended up sitting next to a Nepalese person, and then the bus crashed because the brakes failed on a zigzag mountain road, and I could have died. And the bus driver started basically driving against the side of the mountain. I thought, God, this bus driver's rubbish. He can't even drive the bus. And the reason why he was driving against the side of the mountain, against the cliff, was because he was trying to stop the bus because the brakes had failed. And he basically saved our whole lives. And then we couldn't carry on, so we all had to get off the bus, and then this other bus arrived. Of course, it was full of people. So the Colombian girl and I basically climbed onto the roof of the bus and sat with all the luggage on the roof. And then we got to our destination, and then we sort of became friends because we kind of bonded over this like near-death experience. And then we basically went up this mountain called, is it the Annapurna range or something in Nepal? So it wasn't like Mount Everest, but it was another mountain range. And we stayed in this like really basic place where the shower was like a bucket of water, and we paid 20 pence. We shared a room. Nothing happened. Like, I really fancied her, but we shared a room and we paid 20 pence a night for this room. It was incredible.
Well, I think you should write about that.
I think so too.
Yeah, I think I should have written about
Absolutely.
that, not about this blooming Colombian girl, Chinese girl rubbish, you know.
No, well,
Write about that story you've just told us. That's
yeah,
fascinating.
that's
it's incredible, isn't it? And then
Yeah.
and then she
Fascinating.
came to London, and we were friends for a little bit, but she's gone now. I don't know
But
where she is.
just the thing of being on the bus and it being empty, and then the person choosing to sit next to you, that's a great opening. It's a great
Yeah, me saying no, fuck off,
Yeah.
bog off. Pardon my language, sorry.
But it's
No,
a great,
bog off.
it's a really great opening, because it already makes us question, well, what is this other girl's motive for sitting next to you? Is she a stalker? Is she fancying you? No, but do you know what I mean? There's all these questions that
Yeah. No, I've had weird things like that. I had
the bus
this.
fills, And then when the bus fills and then you end up having all these dramatic things happening that throw you together, it's a really
Yeah,
setup.
it's
That's great.
true. I could make it into a short story, couldn't I? Actually, I
would.
was stalked by this Korean psychiatrist who worked for Samsung in the airport, in another airport, because I've traveled a lot. I love traveling. And this Korean psychiatrist, everywhere I went, she kept popping up, you know, she was on the bus and then she's sitting next to me and then she's sitting opposite me and then she just wouldn't leave me alone.
Well, leave that for another story.
Yeah, I
Yes,
will.
exactly.
Sorry. I have too many stories. See.
Well, you've got lots of material. And I tell you, if you've got all that material, then you need to get it down. But that's great. So how wonderful. I feel like I've had a mini break tonight. Thank you all so far for your writing. I haven't been anywhere but Penge for a very long time. So wonderful. Thank you all for your efforts. So we're going to move on to the practical part of tonight now. And I was thinking, and a lot of you have already touched on the idea of love, but I wanted to, well, I'm going to first of all introduce you to a wonderful writer called Anne Lamott. Now, I don't know if any of you have read Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott. It is a book, it is some instructions on writing and life. So she is quite a quirky American author. She's a novelist, but she has written this book about writing, which I find is like a Bible, because if I ever lack energy or feel like I need a sort of guide or some wisdom or to have a laugh, I will open this at random. And there is always a little golden section that will just will instruct me for the day and will help me get back on the horse. So if you can get a copy of this, then this is a great thing to have by your side whilst you are writing. But I'm going to read something that she's written because I was thinking this week, there's all sorts of reasons for writing. One of them is to be published if you so desire, but also rereading Anne Lamott's book got me thinking about other reasons for pursuing a writing life, and how it's a lot more about the way in which we can begin or the way we continue to see the world and think about the world. Writing about the world sort of opens us up in a different way. So she says in a chapter very near the end of the book that becoming a writer is about becoming conscious. So in a world where making enough money from being a writer, I'm afraid to say, is a little bit difficult sometimes, I was thinking about all the other ways in which writing is important in our lives, which isn't just about making money or having a publishing career. And so I thought I'd read you a few words from Bird by Bird, just because I want you to feel the inspiration from it, but also she's quite humorous. So I thought I'd start tonight's practical session off by, oh, Paul, am I allowed to share? Can you let me share, please, Paul? I should ask you this every week. Am I on? Oh, hold on. Share screen, there we are. Right. Now that's a picture of the front. It's not very useful. Right, so I'm just going to read this out. This is from near the back of the book. And this is about, it's called The Last Class, but this is not the last class tonight. So hurrah, we've got more time. There are so many things I want to tell my students in our last class, so many things I want to remind them of. Write about your childhoods, I tell them for the upteenth time. Write about that time in your life where you were so intensely interested in the world, when your powers of observation were at their most acute, when you felt things so deeply. Exploring and understanding your childhood will give you the ability to empathize, and that understanding and empathy will teach you to write with intelligence and insight and compassion. Becoming a writer is about becoming conscious. When you're conscious and writing from a place of insight and simplicity and real caring about the truth, you have the ability to throw the lights on for your reader. He or she will recognize his or her life and truth in what you say, in the pictures you have painted, and this decreases the terrible sense of isolation that we have all had too much of. Try to write in a directly emotional way. Well, hello, you've all done that today. But try to write in a directly emotional way instead of being too subtle or oblique. Don't be afraid of your material or your past. Be afraid of wasting any more time obsessing about how you look and how people see you. Be afraid of not getting your writing done. If something inside you is real, we will probably find it interesting and it will probably be universal. So you must risk placing real emotion at the center of your work. Write straight into the emotional center of things. Write toward vulnerability. Don't worry about appearing sentimental. Worry about being unavailable. Worry about being absent or fraudulent. Risk being unliked. Tell the truth as you understand it. If you are a writer, you have a moral obligation to do this, and it is a revolutionary act. Truth is always subversive. Ethan Kanin insists that you should never write out of vengeance, while I tell my students that they should always write out of vengeance, as long as they do so nicely. If someone has crossed them, if someone has treated them too roughly, I urge them to write about it. Two of my students in different sessions decided to write about the switches that their parents selected from backyard trees and with which their parents used to beat them. Use these memories, I told them. They are yours. This should not have happened to you. Personally, I would write about this partly out of a longing to make sense of it all and partly out of vengeance. And this, I tell my students, may be as good a time to do as any to discuss libel. Libel is defamation by written or printed word. It is knowingly, maliciously saying things about people that cast them in a false or damaging light. This means that if you lived with a man who had a number of curious personal and professional habits and circumstances that his friends and clients happen to know about, and if these friends can identify this man in your work by these habits and circumstances, you should probably change the details dramatically. If he was famous for having long toenails, make them nasal hairs instead. If he dyed his hair black, have him use foundation instead and maybe the merest hint of blusher. However, if he revealed himself through his actions toward you to be a sociopathic narcissist, you can attempt to capture his character and use actual conversations, just as long as this specific man is not identifiable by your descriptions. Change everything that would point to him specifically. Leave out his kleptomaniac leanings, leave out the kind of car he really drove and the fact that he hated smokers so much that he planted a tiny tree in the ashtray. Make yourself the first wife or the girlfriend instead of the third wife. And do not include his offensive children, especially the red-haired twins. If you disguise this person carefully so that he cannot be recognized by the physical or professional facts of his life, you can use him in your work. And the best advice I can give you is to give him a teeny little penis so he will always be less likely to come forth. So that is just a bit of out there. This is what Anne Lamott is like. She is all for the truth but also going to dangerous places. But this was, I found this small piece at the end of the chat, at the end of the book, and there's loads more sort of advice like this on writing about life, and I thought it was actually quite useful to think about things in that way, especially if we are thinking of putting our work out into the world, or you are thinking of putting your work out into the world at some point, about how easily you can change a particular detail so that you feel that you can write about people. You can swap your own story. So if it was your first husband, it could be your third husband. You can always change the details, but keep the sort of emotional truth there. And I know, Paul, in your latest novel, you changed, you took something very true and something very painful, and you changed the characters using a similar dynamic of a story, or you shifted it all, didn't you? I was just wondering if you wouldn't mind just commenting on that, just to let everyone know what you did there, because I think it was genius.
Well, basically, I was the victim of an online stalker, which went on for considerable time, and then tipped over into real life as well, and became very, very, very worrying, to the point that I had security, and then eventually the police got involved, and an arrest was made, and it went to court, and they were found guilty and given a restraining order. It was a woman, much to my surprise. And when the court case was in 2013, so it's some time ago, and I knew that I would write about it, but I wasn't sure how. And I realized the only way to write about it was to basically turn it around, so that the character, the character who is the victim, inverted commas, isn't the main character. The main character is actually the stalker. So I tell the story largely from her point of view, and she's the first person narrator, who is clearly unreliable from the beginning. Is that there are so many psychological thrillers where the twist is that the narrator is unreliable. Well, duh. So she's clearly unreliable from the beginning. The twist is something very different to that, and it apart from giving me a fresh way of approaching the story, it was actually very therapeutic for me, because in order for it to work, I had to get inside this character's head, who was there were enough similarities with the real person, but they were a very fictionalized version. I used bits of other stories I'd heard, bits of my own backstory. There's bits of me in her, and by going inside the head of the character and writing it from their point of view, largely, because there are also scenes from the other character's point of view, but they're third person, so you're slightly more distant from him. It actually enabled me to sort of let go of it, because I was very angry after the court case was over, and after it was all over. I had this terrible anger I was hanging on to, and writing about it in the way that I did proved to be very therapeutic in a way I wasn't anticipating. So I actually end up feeling sorry for that person now, rather than angry at the thought of them.
Mm.
But it was a very deliberate decision. I knew I would write about it. I knew I had to write about it with that character being the dominant voice. And then one day, just out of the blue, this voice just started whispering in my head, and I knew the opening line. And once I started, and I should say, I've never written a novel in first person before. I've only ever written in third person. It's the first time I'd ever written a novel where a large chunk of it is in first person. And there's something so immediate about it, and it so suited the nature of the piece, because she's speaking in first person, but she's addressing him the whole time. She's always speaking to the same person in her head. And then you learn through her sort of diary entries that she's basically voicing. You hear about what happened to her in her life, and what drove her to this point, and what made her the person she is. So it's a very nimble way of writing. You're able to leap all over the place once you're inside someone's head. You can go anywhere. Time frames can change. You can go from the present into the immediate past, into the past, and then back again very easily. And then I did it in alternate chapters. So there were her chapters, and then there were his chapters, which were much more controlled, because he's a very controlled person, and she's this kind of free-spirited person who clearly has issues. But I hope I made her sympathetic. I hope I made her sympathetic, because that was the intention.
Yeah, you did. It's fantastic.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think changing point of view is always an interesting thing to do if you are interested in looking at a story in a different way. But that's also quite an experimental phase that you can get into if you are perhaps writing fiction as well, often. But I know a lot of us here are writing memoir and things from life. So I thought, but I just wanted to introduce that idea to you. So at any point, if you wanted to experiment with writing from a different character who was in your actual story, then you can feel free to try that and put on a different pair of shoes, for instance. It's just worth bearing in mind. So what I thought we would do now is that I'm going to suggest a warm-up exercise just to get our wordy brains going at this time of night. It's 8:10, and I don't know about you, but I've had to have a Diet Coke. I'll pay for it later. Anyway, so this is just a warm-up before we get on to the other part of writing tonight, which is actually going to hopefully, I'm going to flip Anne Lamott a little bit, and we're going to do writing about love in a way, so we don't get to go to the darkness, to the dark side too much tonight. So this is the warm-up exercise, and it's a short one, and it's called the alphabet paragraph, and you have 5 minutes where you go through the alphabet and you write a continuous sentence for a paragraph. You can use commas, and you start with the letter A, and then you go B, C, D, obviously through the alphabet, and you have to write a complete paragraph from A to Z. And so you would start with a book came down. It has, so you see what I mean? You have to just go through the letters of the alphabet and try and write a paragraph from A to Z. It's just a warm up. Does that make sense? A, B, C.
So each word in sequence begins with each letter of the alphabet.
Yes, that's it. Thank you, Paul. So it's just a warm up, but see if you can get to Z, and without losing steam. So it's more like a sort of crossword warming up of the brain puzzle. So I'll give you 5 minutes from now. So start with A and get to Z. Well done. 3 of you have won old Easter egg of mine, but I'll send you in the post. It got the brain working and fired up, I hope. Good. We can, I love A to Z. I think it's a very interesting concept. So if you ever want to write a story, it's actually quite a good structure. If you wanted to write a short story, you can use the A to Z of childhood. So for every letter, you have a word. It's a bit of a different kind of approach than I remember, but it's provocative in the sense that you have to come up with one word, and then you can write a little passage about each word that you associate with childhood or any subject that you actually want to just sort of brainstorm about. And it gives you a structure that will force you to imagine and give a something to that letter, so that you then know that by the time you've got to Z, you know, you've kind of finished that exercise. So if you ever wanted to do that, I think it's a great way to a different alternative to I Remember. So Anne Lamott was talking about traumatic experiences in her little piece that I read out, but as I said, I wanted to flip that tonight, because I feel like we could all do with some levity, and I thought we should try to start to write about love. Well, some of you have already covered some of the subjects to do with love, or the difficulties of it, but I thought what better place to start than to write about places full of warmth and heart and sharing and desire and things that could go awry again. One of my favorite subjects, things that don't go to plan. And this is bed. So this is going to be all about beds. And I once met an author who said that he only writes, if he has a difficult scene to write, he will go to bed and write it, because it's the most comfortable place to tackle difficulties in his mind. Anyway, that's just a thought. But I thought I'm going to give you some prompts, and you can really adapt this and take this wherever you want to go with it. And also, it's a great idea. You can use this as another structure of a way to write about your life, if you wanted to do life writing, but also a way to sort of use it for fiction if you like. So I'm going to put these in chat because these are different prompts, but basically for the rest of this evening is going to be writing time, so you can get going on a piece of writing. So I want you to think about beds, and I want you to think about memories perhaps of waking up in other beds, people you've woken up alongside, times you've had to share a bed. You could write about being tucked into bed. You can write about waking up in hotel beds if you want to continue your traveling theme. Caravans, sleeping bags, chairs, benches, floors, any places you've woken up can be a bed, or interpreted as such. This is a great one. You can write the story of your bed, how you came to own it, who you've shared it with, what you like about it. Or you could write about a bed where you've watched someone else for a while, whether that's in a way in which we watch sometimes people that we really love or desire, or also perhaps someone who's been ill or is ill and we're caring for them. And then if you want to get into some dark stuff, you can write about what is under the bed. As a child, what is under the bed is almost like lifting the lid on fears, the strange sort of fairy tales sort of underneath of what as a child you were afraid of. So I want you just to pick one of these. I mean, you could write about, it's whichever way you want to take this, but I would pick one for now, and I'm going to put these in chat, and just you can use the I Remember again as a way of accessing the beds. You can just take perhaps a particular bed that you've kept with you for a very long time and has moved from place to place, or you could decide on a particular time that you want to write about, perhaps a trip where you have been writing about a trip and you want to describe all the hotel beds that were there, or floors, if you're still wanting to write more about what you've already started on. So I'm going to just post the bed exercise here in chat, and so you can refer to that if you want to. But for the next 25 minutes, I want you just to write, and write automatically as you have done before, so you just see what comes up and keep moving the pen across the page. And you can write, you know, love is a broad subject. So that's why I decided to give you a bit of structure, i.e. a focus. But if it takes you away from the bed and you find your story heading off somewhere else, just go with it. But if you want to stick to the structure, then you can write about, you know, one of these particular one of these prompts. So beds. This is not supposed to make you sleepy, by the way. So does anyone have any questions about the bed exercise? Lovely. Right, I shall time you 25 minutes and get writing, get as much information as you want down, see where it leads. If you wanted to also change point of view, you could think about that, but that might be for another time. That was just a seed being planted. Okay, so ready, steady, right. And I always find it quite incredible that the whole world goes to bed wherever they lie down, but and we're kind of, you know, the mass of us just once, you know, as the sun goes down, we all sort of go and lie down. It's just incredible, the millions of people doing the same thing, but in different circumstances. So now you've done a short bit of writing, you might have something that feels like the start of something new. You might have something that you have just one sentence that you can pluck out and think, right, I really like that idea, or that has just set off something that I want to write more about. So if you want to continue writing about whatever you've discovered today, this bed, or around the idea of beds in your life, or different rooms or different places you've been, then please continue. You can continue working on this. Please take out anything you don't think is working, and you can leave yourself with one small part if that's all that you want, and start again. So this could be a springboard, but it could also be a different element of something that you could bring into something you've already started. So it's up to you. But for next week, also I had an idea, going back to the idea of point of view and switching point of view. You could even try writing about what it's like to wake up with yourself, from a different person's perspective. So if you felt that was interesting, you could do a portrait of you, of yourself, you know, through someone else's eyes. So that is always interesting as well. And that comes into perhaps sort of, you can use a mirror, you could try and imagine what it's like to sort of visualize yourself. I just think if that's something that appeals to you as a sort of almost like a flip side of a piece of memoir, of changing a story that you know well, you know, the stories that we often tell about ourselves are sometimes interesting to flip and to be told through someone else's viewpoint. That often will open up a different type of story. So there's lots you can do and lots you can experiment with over the next week to do with point of view, or if you just want to continue working from bed. So next week, what I thought would be also very interesting is to bring, if you could all bring a photograph. Now, if you have printed old school photographs on paper, that would be brilliant. If you don't have access to your packs of photographs anymore, which I'm sure some people don't have, then bring a photograph on your phone. But ideally, it would be a photograph on a piece of paper, printed out. I've got a fair few. I don't know if everyone has kept their photographs, but even if you don't have one and you want to just bring a photograph you found, it doesn't have to be yours. But I think because we're going to be working from the photograph, it probably would mean more to you if it was a photograph of your own. It has to have people in it. That is the second requirement. Just to have you can have lots of people in it, or it can just have one or two. But this is just what I would like for you to bring next week. So you've got a week. Now this could be dangerous. It could start you on sifting through what could become a very very lengthy trip down memory lane. If you're anything like me, I get out my chest of memories and I'll be flipping through the albums for some time. But it's up to you. It's going to be an interesting thing to do for next week. So you don't have to do anything to do with the photograph before next week, by the way. So does anyone have any comments on anything that they discovered in the last half an hour? Sorry, Michelle, what was the first bit about bringing the photograph?
Yeah, the first bit about the photograph.
Oh yes, it's just to bring a photograph for next week.
Oh, any photograph, but
any
with people
photograph with people in it. Yeah, preferably
okay,
printed on paper if you've got them. Great. So did anyone want to have a quick word about anything they've discovered in the last half hour to do with writing about beds before we go? Rachel.
Oh, I was really glad to have the time to write, because I really struggled the last week to decide. I got really stuck with a specific kind of perfectionism that I'm quite used to, where I had so many different ideas, and then I was like, it was just very specific self-criticism coming in that I wasn't really able to overcome and get through to a piece that I was happy to finish and share. And I'm really glad of the last half an hour, because even though I went off on lots of tangents, I feel full again of hope of, you know, all these different fragments that I've put together, and how easily I feel I could actually just decide to go with a piece of writing on those, rather than going, could it be this or that, or do I do it this way? It just feels nice to feel a bit more secure about those different threads to follow. So thank you.
Good. Nothing like getting one's optimism back, and the freedom that from that perfectionism. That is a killer, that perfectionist voice. Definitely try and hang that one out to dry.
I really liked what you read out as well. That woman's book, Bird by Bird, was lots of what she'd written. I just thought was so beautifully worded and felt really succinct and kind of profound. So that was great too. Just like, be worried about not getting your writing done. That like hit me quite hard.
Can I just say that, you know, we all have that nagging voice. I don't know any author friends of mine, many of whom have been published many times, who don't have that voice. And it usually is at its loudest when you're about 2/3 the way through a novel and you realize it's the worst novel that anyone's ever written, and you have to just keep on going and ignore it till you get to the end and then go back and fix it. That's basically all you can do. When I worked as a journalist, I learned very quickly that, you know, you never write a piece perfectly. You write it roughly and then you redraft it until you make it as good as it can be. And you have to apply the same sensibility and the same method, I think, to any kind of writing. The first draft is just to get it down. Don't worry too much about how rough it is. Don't let that voice that's telling you it's not good enough stop you. Just get it down, because you can edit a bad piece of writing. You can't edit a blank page.
That's right. And on page 21 of Anne Lamott's book, she has written shitty first drafts.
Yeah.
So
we've all got them.
And she tells it as it is. They're all shitty most of the time.
I can confirm as a medical writer, yes. First drafting.
I really think that a first draft is, I mean, Stephen King's book on writing is got lots of good advice in it, I think. But one of the things he says is that, you know, a first draft is really, or he calls it a zero draft, but it's really for finding out what your book is really about. Because even if you're someone who plans things quite meticulously, which I'm not, I'm more of a pantser than a planner, but even if you plan very meticulously, once the book comes to life and characters start to take on a life of their own, which they really do, and it sounds so wanky, but it's true, they do, you suddenly find yourself going in directions you weren't expecting. And it's only when you've gone through that and got to the end that you realize what the book is really about. And so I think you need to give yourself the freedom to just enjoy that process, because you know, once you reach this, well, should you, or if that's what you want, where you become a you know, published author. And if you're in the situation where, like some people I know, I'm not in that position, but some people I know are in a position where they publish a book every year, they never have the luxury of that ever again, because they have to deliver on time every year. So enjoy the luxury of just having the time just to feel your way through it and enjoy it for what it is.
Can I just end tonight's session on a chapter in Anne Lamott's book that followed Shitty First Drafts, which is called Perfectionism. And it says, perfectionism is the voice of the oppressor, the enemy of the people. It will keep you cramped and insane your whole life, and it is the main obstacle between you and a shitty first draft.
Wise woman.
I like her choice of words, straight to the point. But anyway, that's inspiration. Hopefully that's inspiring for you and not not too rude or off-putting. But yes. Oh right, okay. Sorry. Okay. So right, I think that's the end of this evening. So if you would like to go to your beds, then write some more. And not yet, no, still light. Thank you very much for another week of truly inspiring work that you've written. And I always get, I don't know about you, Paul, but I always get a lot from writing workshops. I think they're
energized,
continually energizing and inspiring. So well done, everyone. Okay. So see you next week, same time, same place, eh?
Thank you so
Bye.
much.
Bye.
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 Bye,
See
folks.
you. Take care.
I can never find the button.
Never can say goodbye.
Never can say goodbye.
Marvelous. Oh, Alison's there.
She's lurking.
There we are.
That was great.
Oh, no, it's good. It loosens us up, doesn't it?
I, for some reason, didn't press